So for the focus of the second half of your response on Pride and Prejudice and Letters to Alice, a very good idea to actually explore is the nature of relationships and how, again, Austen challenges the expectation or the typical relationships of her era, and how she, how she challenges what's typical at the time. Okay, so to start with, you need to actually establish what the typical expectations were. So it should already be pretty evident, or common knowledge, hopefully, to you that the expectations for people to get married, especially women, during the Georgian period, 19th century, is very much based on financial security and stability. Okay, so and considering that, it's really important to note that the Bennet girls are in a position where they actually completely unsupported financially after their father dies. So this is something we'll come to. Weldon actually gives us a really different insight to what Austen does in relation to the dire need portrayed in the novel for the girls to get married, particularly from the perspective of Mrs. Bennet, and certain other characters, but obviously she's the main person there. Whereas what Austen does is she sort of portrays marriage as just like a choice, or something that, you do only if you're in love, versus do because you have to, because that's what you need in terms of your ability to survive. So it's really interesting because Austen portrays that sort of reason for marriage as being quite ridiculous, superficial, fickle. She does that because she's already set up Elizabeth as the moral voice of the novel. So then when Elizabeth witnesses Charlotte's marriage, for example, to Mr. Collins, on the grounds of something like financial security, after having just rejected him herself, it starts looking like, it's really normal to just turn down a marriage like that. But really, in actual fact, that is a completely irrational thing to do for the particular era, which Weldon does actually go into. So that's the sort of thing we're going to be talking about in this paragraph. Okay, so to start with, there's a need for marriage in this particular era, okay? And Austen illustrates this through Mrs. Bennet. Now, of course, she makes fun of Mrs. Bennet, but what we're going to talk about here is that actually Mrs. Bennet's fears are completely legitimate, given or when provided with an understanding of the context, which obviously we get from Weldon. So what you may find is that it'll work a little bit better for you to actually combine both Austen and Weldon together in these paragraphs, the second two paragraphs, because Weldon sort of explains what's going on in Austen's text anyway. So that's sort of the way that you can go about it. So okay, cool. So you've got Mrs. Bennet, who's, and the business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. Now, have a look at the way that a metaphor there is used to compare marriage to a business, okay? So it's extremely, it's very much a financially driven goal that needs to be accomplished, okay? Then we have a look at Charlotte and Collins is just really the best example of the kinds of marriages that went on, and so is Mrs. Bennet and Mr. Bennet, really. We have this whole idea of, Mr. Bennet does not respect his wife at all, and makes fun of her, and there's really no communication, no real connection between them. But obviously we see Charlotte and Mr. Collins as well, and you're not going to get to write about everything, so pick a relationship and then give your examples from there, okay? Okay, cool. So to start with, Mr. Collins is not a sensible man, which Austen says. Okay, so clearly we understand that Charlotte is not marrying this guy because she thinks highly of him at all. In fact, if anything, when they get married, she encourages him to spend as much time outside as possible, away from her. Okay, but she doesn't mind the solitude. So, but essentially, she's a very pragmatic character, actually. Although Elizabeth thinks she's not. So she says that she actually criticizes Charlotte for the decision that she's made, but really she's made a very pragmatic decision there, given the context again. So she says, the narration is, he would be her husband, so Mr. Collins would be Charlotte's husband. Without thinking either highly of men or of matrimony, marriage had always been her object. It was the only honourable provision for a well-educated woman of small fortune and however uncertain of giving happiness, must be the pleasantest preservative from want. Great irony in that quote, just given the fact that, she doesn't think highly of men or of matrimony, but she always wanted to get married, okay, which sort of illustrates that there's something else provided through marriage, other than, just marriage itself or the desire for a companion, which is, stability. All right, so that's obviously the reason that she's done it. Also looking at it being the only honourable provision, very much the case for this particular context. There was not a lot of option in relation to what women were actually able to do. Okay, as something that you can then extend in your writing into what Weldon does. Okay, so and Weldon, and this is where her use of factual tone, or like her, use of statistics and so on, really come into play. Okay, so she says, and so to start with, if you have a look at A Terrible Time to Be Alive, she talks about the options that women actually have, which are extremely limited. Okay, so she says it could be a chimney sweep, a butcher, a prostitute. There were 70,000 prostitutes in London in 1801 out of a female population of some 475,000. Okay, pretty shocking statistic given that you've got a population of almost 500,000, so half of those are going to be women. So let's say 250,000 men, you have 70,000 prostitutes. That's like almost like, my maths isn't great, but like one prostitute, 3 men or something. So some crazy statistic there. So you can really see the desirability of marriage, given that those are your options. Okay, only 30% of women married, 70% remained unmarried. And women inherited only through their husbands. So women didn't have the ability to own property, to earn a living, really, apart from something like what was mentioned above. So marriage actually just really starts looking a lot more desirable. And, okay, fine, you may marry some idiot like Mr. Collins, but better than being a prostitute, right? And so... yeah, great. So something that we kind of make fun of is things like, getting married for financial status and so on. But as Weldon says, it is the stuff of our women's magazines, but it was the stuff of their life, their very existence. Okay, so she's really clarifying the need for women to actually secure themselves financially, particularly through marriage, and that not being something that used to be like scoffed at, which it is now, and which is so funny because Austen totally does it, which is extremely progressive and very much more like how we would do it today, thanks to people like her who started it. But really, like, it was a serious issue. So what then happens is that Weldon shows a lot more sympathy for someone like Mrs. Bennet. She says, no wonder Mrs. Bennet, driven half mad by anxiety, so you got a hyperbole there, half mad, to sort of emphasize how worried she is about actually being able to provide or her daughters to be taken care of. Keeps saying, oh, I don't know what will become of us. I mean, she sounds so ridiculous, but really it's true. If they don't have, there's obviously no male in the family, so without one of the girls being very well married, they're really going to be struggling. Okay, so that pretty much covers really what you can talk about in that paragraph. And then what you want to do is discuss that despite the expectations of the period in which Jane Austen wrote, she creates this new ideal, similar to the way that she does it for women. She creates a new ideal for marriage and marital relationships, okay, in which love, respect, and I guess growth and development are very much key to the relationship, rather than just being based on superficial things. So Elizabeth and Darcy are obviously the main relationship that you want to focus on here. Okay, so it clearly forms and in challenge or opposition to the expectations of their era to marry for financial security. Okay, so as Weldon says about Austen believed it was better not to marry at all than to marry without love, and that's something very much mirrored in her protagonist, I was going to say hero, but actually you can't call Lizzie a hero. Heroine, Elizabeth. Okay, so, you know, just to start with, I mean, the examples of her even refusing Mr. Collins and then the first point, refusing Mr. Darcy, really demonstrates her commitment to not marrying unless she's going to marry for love. Okay, so we kind of know that quote, you know, I'm determined that nothing but the deepest love will ever induce me into matrimony. She really means that and really demonstrates it through her declining these men. Then what you have is the love that actually develops between Darcy and Elizabeth. Okay, so Darcy is described as a man violently in love. You know, the use of, let's see, technique violently. I mean, it's pretty exaggerated there. He's not really violent. Obviously, but it is, it's sort of a hyperbole emphasizing the passionate nature of his love, you know, and, you know, and which has developed over the course of quite a long period of them getting to know each other, okay, and changing and growing through their relationship with each other. So Darcy himself changes as well. So by you, I was properly humbled. But really, like when Elizabeth describes the formation of their relationship, particularly to convince her shocked father of the fact that she actually isn't really cares about this man. She was earnest and solemn in her reply, so she could be really kind of like level-headed about it. In alignment with what we talked about in the first paragraph, explaining the gradual change which her estimation of him had undergone, relating her absolute certainty that his affection was not the work of a day. Okay, so really important to look at the use of words like gradual and not the work of a day. It illustrates there's a real like solid development of their relationship rather than something that just happens, you know, really quickly, such as Charlotte and Mr. Collins getting engaged. That just happens instantaneously, because it's based on superficial things, whereas the growth that develops in the relationship between Darcy and Elizabeth is really indicated through the way that she describes that. You know, it's taken the entire course of a novel to actually come to fruition. And then what you start having is Weldon really pointing out what makes a piece of literature great. Okay, something that will last throughout time. Okay, so she says that Austen left a legacy for the future to build upon. Clearly that's metaphorical, but you know, you can see that that's actually happened. Okay, obviously the reason for why we're still studying it. She says if writers build well, so this is going back to the city of invention motif, where, you know, writers build cities. So if writers build well and soundly and in the service of truth, who is the God they worship? They're in the city of invention. Their houses live after them, as a good house in the world remains long after its inhabitants have turned to mold. Okay, so that's a really good one about, you know, Austen's continued value, okay, or the textual integrity of her text. So obviously use of metaphors there, and, you know, the whole house in the world remains, etc. Another example of that is Austen metaphorically took the world by its heels and shaking it, setting it on its feet again, altogether better and improved. Okay, so we really see the value of this text lasting throughout time, and the changes that she very much facilitated, you know, as evident through what we experience, but also obviously what we can witness, Auntie Faye's niece accomplishing and Faye herself accomplishing. Okay, so that really sums up, a basic structure for the essay. And again, just to recap, you want to, you know, split the essay into two key ideas that you can go into in depth, and then you want to start actually applying these two different questions. The more questions you do, the more confident you will be with being able to actually adapt it. And make sure that when you do get a new question, you are changing the words of words of your topic sentences, and obviously throughout to some extent. So these are pretty broad concepts I've given you, and they're broad so that you can adapt them, okay, but they're also specific enough that you can kind of go in with some sort of a structure. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that, and look forward to seeing your draft on it.